Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and I'm going to be sharing with you Chapter 7 from our book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This chapter is titled The Five Precepts, A Householder's Guide to Daily Practice. This is where you're learning more about the natural law of Kamma and wise decisions that lead to wholesome results in our life. Oftentimes people have been taught that the Buddha shared no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants. And this is actually untrue. The Buddha never taught this. That sounds like black and white. It sounds like rules and commandments. And the Buddha didn't teach that way. He used much more illuminating language than just this black and white approach that you sometimes see in different places. So I'm going to share with you the original words of the Buddha on the five precepts, and then I'm going to show you how to relate those five precepts to day-to-day decisions that you're going to be encountering and making over the course of your life. And I'll help you to be able to see very clearly how to apply these precepts in one situation or another. And it's going to help you to be able to make these wise decisions leading to wholesome results in your life, or wholesome Kamma. Without the wisdom of these five precepts and how to apply them in your day-to-day life, you'd be making unwise decisions that would lead to unwholesome results. So I'd like to welcome all of you to our class today, and at the same time invite you to join for our meditation. After our meditation, that's where I'm going to start the class to be able to share with you the five precepts and then helping you relate it to your day-to-day decision-making that you experience on a day-to-day basis. So the way that I start the meditation is with some chanting. So if you'd like to chant to ease into the meditation, this is going to help you to get more benefit out of the meditation itself. Then afterwards, I'm going to provide some guidance to be able to help you during the meditation. There's going to be a period of time of quietness where we're just meditating together. Then we're going to come out of that with some more chanting, and that's where I'll start today's class. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakewa Bhutang Mahakewanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakewata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakewato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakewa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes And start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Bhutang Mahakavanang Apiva Teyami Sawakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anuttaro Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, welcome to everyone. Nice to see everyone in class today. Welcome to our class. As I was mentioning, this is the chapter 7 talk that I'm doing on the 5 precepts. The 5 precepts are a householder's guide to daily practice. Everybody and anybody who's interested in getting to enlightenment would need to know the 5 precepts and be able to practice them closely. But householders tend to practice these very closely and learn these really early in their journey on the path to enlightenment. What a householder is someone who's living a household life, someone who's not ordained. They will typically learn these 5 precepts pretty early on in their journey to enlightenment. So far, what you've been learning in this group learning program, if you've been learning along, is you've been learning the Eightfold Path. And I've really been focusing a lot of time on that with a couple of other chapters here and there kind of sprinkled into the mix of what you've been learning about in regards to the teachings of the Buddha. But now we're going to be moving into some new content all throughout the rest of the group learning program, where you're going to be learning all the remaining chapters of the book to be able to help you to more fully understand the path to enlightenment. That eightfold path that you've been learning, and perhaps you've been working on memorizing it, and maybe you've even been practicing it in certain parts of your life, independently verifying that it's true and then practicing it. The 5 precepts are what plugs into that the Eightfold Path is a core central teaching that's going to help you to be able to make your way to enlightenment. Without the Eightfold Path, you would have no ability to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state that is enlightenment. So learning and practicing the Eightfold Path is really important and something that you need to spend some time in to be able to memorize it and then be able to practice it on a day-to-day basis and understand that it's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. You're not going to master it in 1 month or 2 months or even 6 months. This program is a 7-month program. You're not going to master the Eightfold Path in that period of time, but you gradually chip away at it little by little by little, dialing it in closer and closer and closer. And as you get your Eightfold Path up and running and you live your life that way for an extended period of time, multiple years, that's what actually produces enlightenment. Remember, it took the Buddha 6 years to get to enlightenment, so it's going to take you some time. But the 5 precepts is something that plugs into the Eightfold Path, and it's going to help you to more fully understand this path, this core central teaching that's going to guide you to enlightenment. As I mentioned, many people think that the Buddha taught no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, and no intoxicants. And if you've been exposed to this type of teaching, I can assure you that that's not the teachings of the Buddha. It sounds like rules and commandments. It sounds like black and white. You're going to see the words of the Buddha on the 5 precepts. If you've already read the book, you've seen them in there, but I'm going to show them to you and I'm going to teach it to you in today's class so you can see exactly what he taught on this important topic. Because as he's teaching you the 5 precepts, he's helping you to be able to understand the natural law of Kamma. This is what he's doing all throughout his teachings, that you need to be able to cultivate wisdom about this natural law. This is what actually leads to enlightenment. This is when we talk about the mind sleeping, it means that it has a lack of wisdom of this natural law. When we talk about the mind is awake, it's because it's cultivated wisdom about the natural law of Kamma, this cause and effect or action and result. You might have heard this referred to as karma. That's just a different language. It's the Sanskrit language, where the original teachings of the Buddha are in the Pali language. So people who study his original teachings will tend to use the word Kamma. And there's nothing mystical or magical here. It's not about a black cloud following you around. It's not anything like that. It's not about punishments and rewards or who's at fault or who's to blame. It's essentially a sequence of events that whenever you make a decision, it's going to produce a certain result. And when you make decisions wisely, you will experience wholesome Kamma or wholesome results. And when you make decisions unwisely, you're going to experience unwholesome Kamma or unwholesome results. And it's important for you to be able to awaken or cultivate wisdom about this natural law, because if you're walking through the world without wisdom of the natural law, you'll struggle and you'll have difficulties. That's what the stress and the anxiety and the guilt and the shame and the fear and the boredom and loneliness and all those other discontent feelings are coming from. It's the mind lacking wisdom about these natural laws. So an individual will struggle and have difficulties navigating the world. Just like when we didn't understand the natural law of gravity, we struggled, we fell down, we hurt ourselves, we bumped our elbows, we hit our head, we broke our toys. But slowly but surely, we gained wisdom of that natural law, and now we can navigate the world peacefully. That we might say that we've awoken to the natural law of gravity, that now we make the decision to tie our shoes pretty tight. We look at the surface of the sidewalk, making sure that we're not giddy and bouncing around so much like a little kid. And now we can climb ladders, we can ride bicycles, we can get on airplanes and fly all over the world because we've awoke to the natural law of gravity. Well, this natural law of Kamma is affecting you whether you're aware of it or not. And the more wisdom you have of this natural law, the more you'll be able to navigate the world peacefully. Because what oftentimes people do when they're experiencing the unwholesome results in their day-to-day life is we tend to blame other people. When we lack wisdom of the natural law of Kamma, we will tend to blame other people for what we experience in our day-to-day life. Or we might say it's good luck or bad luck, or it's destiny or fate. Or we might say that it's God or some entity called the universe controlling us and forcing us to experience a particular thing. Or again, some people will blame what they experience on other people. So if you subscribe to this type of thinking, your mind isn't awake to the natural law of Kamma, and you're going to keep experiencing the same problems over and over and over again. And you're essentially locked in because you can't change good luck or bad luck. You can't change destiny or fate. You can't change God or some entity called the universe, and you can't change other people. But that's actually not true. That's not actually what's truly occurring. What's truly occurring is that you're experiencing the results of the decisions that you're making. And when you lack wisdom of this natural law, you will tend to inadvertently make unwise decisions, thinking that the decisions that you're making are all the best in the world, but that's the ego in there. telling you that you're so smart, you're so intelligent, everybody's doing things the wrong way. It's your way that is the right way, and everybody else's is the wrong way. So when you get that ego out of the way and you understand that there's a natural law here that you haven't learned and developed the wisdom of yet, now you can put yourself in the position to be able to actively learn, grow, and develop to be able to independently verify this natural law so that then you can see the wise decisions that lead to wholesome results. And more, as you're making those wise decisions, you'll be experiencing more and more wholesome Kamma. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you will have fully extinguished all your unwholesome Kamma. You will only be experiencing wholesome Kamma. Because it's your life, your decisions, and your results. And if you are maybe confused about whether this is true or not, I would suggest you ask yourself these questions to be able to see that it's you that's making the decisions in your life and you are experiencing these results. Ask yourself, who chose the hairstyle that you're wearing right now? Who chose whether or not you ate breakfast this morning? Who chose what you ate for breakfast this morning? Who chose where you live? Who chose whether you have a certain job or not? Who chose your life partner or the friends or the people you spend time with? Who chose any number of things, right? Who chose the level of education that you have? Who chose any number of things? Who chose the amount of money that you have in your bank account? These are all choices that we make that lead to a particular result. Who chose whether you even, attend this class or not? These are all choices that we make, and we experience the results of those choices. So you can see very clearly when you look around the world how you're experiencing the results of your decisions. And the beauty in understanding this is that it's very empowering. Because if there's anything that you don't particularly care for that's going on in your life, all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. Whereas if it's good luck or bad luck or destiny or fate or God or the universe that is controlling what you experience or other people, you're locked in. You can't improve any aspect of your life. But when you start to come to the understanding that what you're experiencing is a result of your decisions, now all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. And learning the 5 precepts is part of that, learning the wisdom so that you can then make different decisions and you can experience different results because it's your life, your decisions, and your results. What the 5 precepts are is it's guidance that's going to significantly reduce your unwholesome Kamma production. The unwholesome results that you experience, it's going to significantly reduce that, helping you to produce more and more of a pure mind and a pure life, because it's going to slowly help you to eliminate certain pollutions in the mind. We talked about those 10 fetters at different times during this program. Next week, we're going to talk about the 3 unwholesome roots. The 5 precepts are helping you to eliminate these pollutions out of the mind. The 5 precepts are going to help you to be able to more fully understand the Eightfold Path. It's the Eightfold Path that's completely eliminating your unwholesome Kamma production through making decisions through the Eightfold Path. You'd only be producing wholesome Kamma. And more, as you bring your practice up to the Eightfold Path and live your life that way for an extended period of time, that's what's going to completely extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma. We're going to talk more about the Natural Law of Kamma 2 weeks from now when we get to chapter 9. But here with the 5 precepts, you're already starting to learn about it. Even when we were talking about the Eightfold Path, you were starting to learn about it as well. The detailed teachings of the Eightfold Path is what's going to ultimately lead to enlightenment, and it's going to teach you to be able to practice harmlessness, where you're not putting out harm, because as long as you're putting out harm, harm is going to come back to you. But the 5 precepts are something that plugs into the Eightfold Path. It integrates into that, further helping you to be able to base your decision-making in harmlessness, because as long as you're putting out harm, harm will come back to you. So the 5 precepts are going to show you in unique situations how to not cause harm. Some things that you're going to hear me talk about with the 5 precepts, they might be things that you've even learned from your primary caregivers, like your mom or dad or your grandparents or your aunts or uncles, maybe mentors in your business life, because the 5 precepts are tapping into the natural laws and helping you to be able to see certain aspects of them. And other teachers have tapped into these natural laws at different times, whether it's Jesus or Prophet Muhammad or even grandma and grandpa. They've tapped into these natural laws and been able to see them to a certain level of degree, where different people will describe them in different ways, and they might kind of talk about them as rules or commandments or things like this. The Buddha never talks about them that way. It's more about wise decision making. It's more about understanding the natural law of Kamma. It's about reducing and eliminating your pollutions of mind so that you can make wiser and wiser decisions. And as you're learning the 5 precepts, it's important that you don't believe them, just like everything else, that you don't believe them, that you learn, you reflect, and you practice. It's also important to understand that the 5 precepts aren't the Buddha trying to convince you to do any particular thing. Remember, the Buddha already got to peacefulness. He already got to joy. What he was doing for the rest of his life from the age of 35 to 80 is helping people to understand what it took for him to get to that peace and joy. And part of that, a significant part of it, was to understand the natural law of Kamma. And the 5 precepts is our window into the natural law of Kamma, helping you to be able to understand wise decision making. Because how can you get to peace and joy if you keep making harmful decisions and all this harm just keeps coming back to you over and over and over and over again? How can you get to a peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life? So by understanding these 5 precepts, you'll be able to make better and better decisions that's going to lead to more and more wholesome results, or wholesome Kamma, and ultimately to a peaceful and joyful mind and a peaceful and joyful life. So I'm going to use his original words to be able to help you here, and I'm going to relate it to common decisions that you make on a day-to-day basis. I'm going to pause a few times as we go in order to open up to questions that you guys have. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, or in Zoom, you can raise your hand electronically and ask any and all questions that you like. So we're going to start with this first precept. Here's the words of the Buddha: abandoning the taking of life, refraining from taking life, without stick or sword, diligent, compassionate, trembling for the welfare of all living beings. Here, whenever you're seeing the original words of the Buddha and you're studying and investigating his teachings, it's important that you don't assume anything. Don't assume that you actually know anything about the teachings. Don't assume you even know anything about the English language, right? If you don't know what the word compassion means, you can look it up in the book series that I share, Volume 1. You can see what I share about what is compassion. And if you don't know what a living being is, you need to investigate that to be able to see the truth for yourself. So don't assume that you know what these things mean. What compassion means is the concern for the misfortune of others, right? So what the Buddha is teaching you to do is cultivate this concern for the misfortune of others. And whenever you're cultivating compassion for other beings, you need to start with yourself, right? If you don't have compassion for this being, and this definition is held up for 2,500 years. So I'm going to introduce you to the 5 aggregates so that you can start to understand what they are. So as you're learning this, you know that you are a living being. So you can reflect on what I'm sharing with you so that you don't believe the 5 aggregates, and you can see that you have all 5 of these things, which determines what a living being is, so that you're not believing what I share. The Buddha teaches that all living beings are going to have 5 things. They're going to have physical form, they're going to have feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, and a consciousness. So let me explain to you what these things are. Form is physical form. A living being is going to have physical form. Feelings are pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant feelings. Perceptions are views and opinions about the world. Volitional formations are choices and decisions, essentially being able to make decisions for your own life. This is free will decisions. Then the consciousness is the mind itself. So you can see that you have all 5 of these. You have physical form, you have feelings, you have perceptions, I'm sure you have views and opinions about the world. You have volitional formations, which are choices and decisions that you make, and then you have a consciousness or a mind. right? And we can look at a squirrel, a rabbit, a turtle, a bird, a snake. These all have all five aggregates. But then we can also look at this description of the five aggregates with something that we know is not a living being, just to make sure that this definition holds up. This is part of the investigation and the examination of the teachings of the Buddha. Perhaps the electronic device that you're listening to this on right now, does it have physical form? Yeah, it has physical form, right? Does it have feelings? No, doesn't have those. Does it have perceptions, like views and opinions about the world? No, doesn't have those. Does it have volitional formations? Does it make decisions? It doesn't, because it can't make any decisions unless there's a human being involved, right? And doesn't have a consciousness or a mind. No, doesn't have those, right? So you can see that this definition of the five aggregates or five criteria holds up across all these different things. And if you need to investigate this further, look at other situations and other objects to be able to determine whether it's a living being or not. Because this is going to help you to be able to make decisions in terms of how you make choices and decisions and how the Buddha would suggest for you to apply this precept in any given situation. As you come in more and more understanding of the five aggregates, that's going to ultimately help you to understand the natural laws. But between now and then, you might use something like what I'm sharing here, which is kind of like a shorthand way for you to be able to understand how to determine what is a living being and what isn't a living being. This isn't the natural law. It doesn't hold up in all cases, but it does hold up in about 99.9% of the situations. That a living being is going to come from an egg, a sperm, and it's going to have a consciousness. All living beings have a consciousness, but they don't all come from an egg and a sperm. But you could use this for the time being until you get more and more familiar with the five aggregates. So when you understand the five aggregates, you come to the understanding that plants, bacteria, viruses, things like this are not a living being. And the challenge is that we tend to use language that doesn't necessarily represent true reality. In the unenlightened state, we will say things like, I'm going to take this antibiotic and kill this bacteria in my body. Or I'm going to kill these weeds that are in my flower bed. So we'll use language that doesn't truly represent what is actually being experienced because of our lack of wisdom in the unenlightened state. But the more you come to understand what a living being is, you'll understand that what you're really doing is you're harvesting a plant, or you're eliminating a bacteria or a virus. And you can see this through the five aggregates, that these things aren't living beings, but you can also see it through the natural law of Kamma. Because anytime you cause harm to a living being, harm is going to come back to you. So if you were killing the bacteria in your body, and this bacteria was a living being, you would experience unwholesome results or unwholesome Kamma. But when you eliminate that bacteria from the body, you actually experience wholesome results because you are now more healthy, right? Or if you harvest a plant, you're experiencing wholesome results because you now have broccoli or cauliflower or an apple or an orange to be able to eat, right? So you can see it through the five aggregates, but you can also see it through the natural law of Kamma. So it's important to be able to discern what is a living being and what isn't a living being, realizing that the language that you might be using and other people might be using is not 100% accurate because of the lack of wisdom that the mind has of these natural laws in the five aggregates. So then what you would like to do is, since the Buddha is teaching you to abandon the taking of life and having compassion for the welfare of all living beings, is look at things like this: euthanasia of human and animal, termination of a pregnancy, suicide, assisted suicide, capital punishment, war, government-sponsored killings, and murder. This is all intentional killings. But whether or not it would be wise or unwise to actually do these things is going to be unique to each situation, because there's unique variables in each situation. We're going to go through a few of these, and I'm going to help you to see how in some situations it could be a wise decision to do some of these things, but in other situations it could be unwise. Now, what you choose to do in your life It's your choice. It's your decisions. I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm not here to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing in your life. I'm here to help you see the natural law of Kamma. And then you make the decisions that you think is best for you in your life. Because this first one that I'm going to use, which is termination of a pregnancy, oftentimes is thought of as a political discussion. I don't think of it that way. I think of it as a human discussion because we have the medical technology to terminate a pregnancy. And in some situations, this can actually be beneficial. And in other situations, it could be potentially harmful. But which decision somebody makes is a choice for them to make. I'm not here to tell somebody what they should or shouldn't be doing in terms of the health of their own body and their own personal decisions. Each individual needs to be comfortable to make their own decisions. In fact, if somebody came to me and said, "Hey, David, should I terminate my pregnancy?" I wouldn't say yes or no. I would say, well, if you terminate your pregnancy, here's what you'll experience. And if you don't terminate it, here's what you experience. And then that person would make their own decision in that situation. So let me share with you this termination of pregnancy of where it can actually be beneficial and where it can actually be harmful. And now you can see for yourself this natural law of Kamma. And then ultimately what you choose to do if you're ever in that situation is a choice for you to make. So let's just say that I was a female, which I'm not, but let's just say I had a womb in this body and that maybe it was impregnated and there's a fetus growing inside the womb. And maybe through medical technology, a medical professional shares with me that this baby that is inside the womb is never going to live a viable life outside the womb. Because with medical technology, we can determine that these days. And this doctor maybe further shares that if I continue to allow this baby to grow inside the womb, that it's threatening my life and I could die at any moment. And their advice would be to terminate the pregnancy. Well, in this situation, if I'm going to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, which is concern for the misfortune of others, I need to live compassionately for this being, who I am. It wouldn't be very compassionate for this being, who I am, to be able to allow this baby to continue to grow, understanding that it's never going to live a viable life outside the womb, and it's threatening my own life. So in this situation, somebody might actually terminate their pregnancy. If they do, it's up to them, right? It's their choice to be able to do that or not. So an individual chooses to do this, that's kind of like a rare situation, maybe a once or twice in a lifetime kind of thing that somebody might actually end up doing that. But now let's just say in another scenario, let's just say I'm very sexually promiscuous, I'm having sex with lots of different partners, I'm regularly getting pregnant, not using any birth control whatsoever. And now I'm ending up getting pregnant regularly. And now maybe 5, 6, 8, 10 different times, I'm terminating pregnancies. Now, if I was doing this, it's going to start causing harm to the physical body. Each time we do an abortion, this termination of a pregnancy, it's going to be a certain medical procedure that's going to impact the health of the body. And now I'm going to experience the results of that. And that's going to produce lack of health within my own body. Because if you're causing harm to living beings, harm is going to come back to you. So again, whether someone chooses to do this or not, it's a choice for them to make. It's not up to me to decide for anybody what they should or shouldn't be doing with their body. But perhaps you can see the natural law of Kamma here more clearly, because oftentimes people see this big gray area with these precepts, but my goal is to help you to be able to see it more and more clearly. Let's take some other ones. Let's take one that's not actually even up here. And it's actually a real life situation, something that happened with us here at our house. Let's just say that your house was being infested by termites and they were starting to eat your house. And you noticed that they're starting to eat your house. Well, if you were going to practice this precept, to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, you understand that you need to eradicate these termites from your home. Because if you continue to allow them to eat your home, that's not living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, because pretty soon you and your family are going to be out of a home. You're not going to have a place to live. So what we did in this situation is we did some research on the internet and we tried to look to see if there was a way to eradicate these termites without killing them. Because we live in the information age, we can do that kind of research. So what we came back with is that there was no way to actually do that. So my wife ended up calling a company to come, and they put these things around the house, and the termites ate this and took it back to their nest, and it ended up eradicating the termites through killing them, right? So in this situation, we were living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings because we were trying to eradicate them without actually killing them. Notice the Buddha is not teaching you to preserve all life at all cost. That's not what he's actually teaching you. That's what people tend to hear when they see things like that. That's black and white. If you're preserving all life at all costs, right? That is not what he's teaching you. He's teaching you to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. And what this is doing is knocking down your craving, your anger, and your ignorance. You're going to learn about this next week with the 3 unwholesome roots or the 3 poisons. So the mind can live compassionately for all living beings, because one of the challenges for an animal, for an insect, is their consciousness isn't to the same level as a human being. If human beings ate wood and we knew that we needed to ingest wood, we would go out into the forest where it's not going to cause any harm to any other living beings, and we would eat this wood, and then we would know that we're not causing harm to any beings, and we wouldn't have any harm come to us. But these insects aren't going to understand that because they don't have that level of consciousness. So that's why they're going to eat whatever they can find, which now they're causing harm. And the natural law of Kamma is that harm's now going to come to them. So in this situation, we were able to do this without any guilt or any shame or any fear, because we knew that we were living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. And there was no unwholesome Kamma that came to us as part of this. Instead, we experienced wholesome Kamma, that our house structurally is now sound and we don't have these termites anymore. So this is where you can see the natural law of Kamma as you're actually practicing. Let's take another one here, like a war. So a government could say to the citizens of their country, hey, we would like you to go over there and kill those people in that other country. And if you go over there and kill those people, we're completely fine with that. But if you come over here on our land and you kill our people, we're going to arrest you for murder. So this is the human law, right? This is where the human laws are prone to error. They're prone to mistakes because they're created by human beings and they're not going to be perfect. But if you understand the natural law of Kamma, you understand that going away to war, your government can't absolve you from the harm that you're going to experience as a result. If you go off into war and you're killing other living beings, you're very likely to be killed yourself, or to be injured. Maybe you have an amputation, or maybe you have a brain injury or something like this. Or maybe you get addicted to drugs or alcohol. Or maybe when you come back home, the natural law of Kamma is that you end up committing suicide. Or maybe you have difficulties reintegrating into society and getting a job and employment and acquiring the basic necessities that you need, or shelter and things of this nature. This is all the harms that are coming to you as a result of having gone off into war and actually caused harm. So whether somebody chooses to do these things or not, again, it's a choice for them to make. What I'm here to do is help you to be able to see this natural law of Kamma, that the government can't absolve you from the natural law of Kamma. You're still going to experience the results of decisions of going off into war and killing. And then sometimes as students ask me questions, they ask me about a do not resuscitate, or DNR. So I'd included it in the book, and I include it in the talks that I give on this particular topic. If you have a DNR, a do not resuscitate, you know what this is, but let me just share with some of those that don't maybe know what this is. What this is this is a legal document that you can sign while you're alive, informing your living relatives that should this body die, don't use medical technology to bring it back to life. And sometimes students ask me, is this practicing this precept? And the answer is yes, you're still practicing this precept because you haven't actually killed anybody at all. All you're saying is that you're comfortable with death, and if this body dies, you're okay with that. So if you have a DNR or you decide to have one, you're still practicing this. You don't need to have a DNR in order to practice this precept, but if you choose to have one at any time, or you have one now, you are still practicing this precept because you haven't intentionally killed any living being whatsoever just by having a DNR. Then sometimes students ask me about defense and protection. They say, if I'm at home and sleeping in my bed at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning and somebody's breaking in through my window, what should I do? Well, the first thing that I share with them is that when someone's breaking into your home at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, coming through the window, they're not bringing you chocolate and flowers. I'm sure of that, right? This is 2, 3 a.m. in the morning. They're breaking through the window. They're entering in through the window. They're there to do harm. And if possible, I suggest for people to get out. Just get out of the house, right? If this person would like to cause harm to the material possessions, or they would like to steal something in your home, so be it. You can replace those things, but you can't replace your life. So if you can get out, call the police, let them come with the equipment and the training that they have. They know how to deal with these kinds of situations. But these particular teachings of the Buddha, it's not black and white. It's not a decision tree that if this happens, do this. If this happens, do that. Because if that was the case, that would be a permanent answer for every single situation. And what the Buddha is teaching you to do is move to this higher consciousness where you can make decisions based on the variables that you're experiencing. And now through your mind and the wisdom that you have, you can make a wise decision in any given situation. So if you understand your first goal would be to get out of the house if you can, then maybe you would turn to that. But perhaps you look outside your window and there's a gang of people outside and it's unsafe for you to go. Or maybe the entire land is on fire. Maybe like some of these places have natural fires where the whole place, the whole neighborhood is on fire. Maybe you can't even get outside your house because of the fire, right? Well, in this situation, if you're backed up in a corner and this person is coming at you with a knife and potentially going to stab this body, it wouldn't be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings to just sit there and let this person continue to stab you, right? So what I teach people to do is cause the least amount of harm as possible. If you can stop this harm coming to you through causing harm, you're not going to get in any kind of trouble. You're going to experience wholesome Kamma. You're not going to experience unwholesome Kamma in that situation. So if they've got a stick, get a bigger stick, right? If they got a knife, get a bigger knife, right? And now cause the least amount of harm as possible to stop this harm coming to you. And now you're going to experience wholesome Kamma in that situation. Sometimes people ask me about eating plant-based food, like going vegan. If somebody would like to do this, you'll see the improvement to the condition of the body and the condition of the mind. There'll be improved health because of this. But whether you choose to ever do this or not, it's a choice for you to make. What you'll notice is that when you're eating meat and you're eating animal flesh, you're not just eating the flesh of the animal. You're eating the drugs and hormones and toxins that are in that animal flesh. They've actually done studies on this, and they can see that it's negatively affecting the health of the body. And it also affects the health of the mind, because they've taken wild fish out of very clean running streams in places like the USA, and they've tested the animal flesh. And they found substances in the animal flesh that shouldn't have been there. Over 90 different substances. They found things like antidepressants, they found cocaine, they found all these different things that weren't supposed to be there. But because human beings have been flushing that stuff into the toilets and we've been polluting our water table, then the fish are picking it up through the groundwater. And then if you're eating farmed animals, they're actually putting hormones and drugs and antibiotics into the farmed animals to grow them faster so they can make more profit. And now it's affecting the health of the body and the health of the mind. So if you would ever like to move to a plant-based food supply, you're going to see improvement to the health of the body and the mind. But whether or not you choose to do this is a choice for you to make. And I'm here to help you see the natural law of Kamma, that it will help to extend your life and improve the health of the body and the mind. So I'm going to pause here and see what questions you guys have on anything that I've been sharing. We can go deeper into any of these things. You can put this into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So it looks like Jeff has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Hi. So my question is, you were saying it seems like you were saying just a mere list of precepts, like, and following them like commandments is insufficient. My question is, on top of that, is it the reason why we're following it can make if we were to incorporate why and our intention into keeping these, then it would be more complete.
You need to make sure you're not following anything at all. You're never interested in being a follower, because a follower is doing so without the wisdom of the why. You need to understand the why behind this, because in order to kill, you need to have a certain amount of craving, a longing, yearning, potentially. There needs to be a certain amount of anger, hatred, and ill will towards this other being. And there's a certain amount of ignorance or unknowing of true reality that the mind doesn't understand, that when you cause harm, harm is coming back to you. This is what we're going to talk about next week. So by practicing this precept, understanding what it is, it's actually helping you to eliminate the craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind, which is the whole thing that's causing discontentedness in the mind. So you need to understand the why behind it, because each situation that you're in is going to be unique. And as you read those variables and you take in those variables, you're going to need to process that through your wisdom to then be able to make a wise decision in any given situation of what you should do in any given situation. So that when we found out we had termites in the home, the first thing we were thinking about is like, all right, well, how do we practice compassion here? And then that's when we were like, okay, well, let's research on the internet and see if we can figure out a way to eradicate them without killing them, right? So right away, we went to compassion rather than just kind of like a knee-jerk reaction of, oh, let's kill them. Let's absolutely kill them. Let's not even think about it. So you need to be able to understand that by knocking down your craving, anger, and ignorance, this is what's going to produce more and more peace and joy in your mind and in your life. And you won't get to that if you follow, or if you think of these as rules or commandments. You need to understand the large gray area and be able to discern that very clearly, because everything that the Buddha is teaching you is based on discernment, which is wise decision making. If you are just following rules or commandments, you're not making wise decisions. You're just following a rule or a commandment, and you won't get to enlightenment by following a rule or commandment. You need to cultivate the wisdom of what the Buddha is really guiding you towards, which is the cultivation of this compassion and the reduction of pollutions of the mind, which the compassion is helping you to be able to do that.
Okay. Yeah. It was like when I started keeping them, I just did it out of discipline, recognizing like from the Kalama Sutta that this is conducive to happiness. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know the why yet, and still don't fully know the why, but I'm still doing it. I've gained more wisdom into the why, but it's not a full level of knowledge here.
Yeah, this is oh, sorry.
Yes.
I thought you were done, Jeff. Sorry about that.
Oh, yeah. So right now, I'm always trying to have intention in it, not just keeping, because without that intention, it's not really purifying my mind enough.
Yeah, this is why just reading the Pali Canon, which I know you read, the original teachings of the Buddha, won't lead to enlightenment. You need an actual teacher to explain to you the why and how all these teachings connect together. You wouldn't be able to just go off on your own and read the Pali Canon and get to enlightenment. Because in the Pali Canon, the Buddha is giving you the teachings, he's giving you the actual natural laws, but the people who documented the Pali Canon, they don't typically share the why behind it. And that's where a teacher is able to really emphasize that for you so that you can more fully develop your wisdom. And now you can apply these teachings in situations that you're in.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. It looks like Paul has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, David. My question is regarding, the Buddha's definition of living beings, which include a consciousness and, perception and so on. I have a hard time imagining what you would consider to be a living being to fall into that category, such as termites, and even right up to, say, certain animals that really they don't have in my opinion, I don't think they have a conscience. I don't even know if they know that they exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how we would even prove that,
Mm-hmm.
that they know they exist. Like, for instance, animals can't even, they don't, when they see themselves in the mirror, when they are faced with a mirror, they don't know that's them.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have, why would we assume that they have a consciousness?
There's no assumptions here. These are things that you can independently verify. Right now, what you're sharing is that you don't have the wisdom to understand and be able to see clearly for yourself that an animal has all five aggregates, but that's something that you're going to need to do, right? That's not something that I'm going to do for you here in this class, but that's something that you're going to need to take offline, and you're going to need to be able to investigate each aspect of this. And where you need help, that's where you reach out to me. Because remember, you're on your own independent journey here. I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm not here to even prove anything to you. I'm helping you to be able to see what you need to learn, and then you're going to need to do that investigation. So I've already done that work. I already know with 100% certainty that what I'm sharing with you in the five aggregates is 100% the truth, and that animals have all five aggregates. But you need to be able to get to that so that you have the wisdom for yourself. So I suggest you take this offline and that you do some research to be able to see this for yourself. And also what I'll share with you, Paul, is that
and you would also
what I'll share with you is that having a consciousness doesn't involve knowing that you exist or being able to look in a mirror and knowing that that is you. That's not part of having a consciousness. A person with a consciousness, like a human being, can have those things, but an animal isn't necessarily going to have that because their consciousness isn't as developed as a human being. Remember, a consciousness is a mind. It's a non-physical, non-tangible thing, and that might even need to be where you start, is just understanding what is a consciousness and what is a mind, because you might not even have that understanding.
Yeah, I can't imagine an insect having a mind.
Mm-hmm.
But you would say that it has a mind, and it has perceptions, and it has all the aggregates of a living being. An insect does, even right down to a termite.
Yes, I know that with 100% certainty, because a termite wouldn't be able to walk. They wouldn't be able to make decisions without a consciousness. They would need a mind, because the physical form is the physical body, but the feelings, the perceptions, the volitional formations, which are choices and decisions, those three things are actually inside of the mind. So a being wouldn't be able to walk and talk and make decisions without a consciousness. They have to have a consciousness to be able to do that. They have to have a mind in order to be able to choose to do those things. Those are free will choices that they're making that's coming from their own mind. There's nothing controlling them to do that. It's their own mind that's doing that.
Okay, I'll think about that one. There's also instinct, and that's guiding them as well. And at any rate, I did have a second question on the same subject, on the same precepts. Is when you talk about abortion or termination of pregnancy, you give like two extreme examples. Mm-hmm. And I understand why you're doing that, because you're helping us, you're teaching us, and you're needing to show both ends of the spectrum. But in the real world, most people are not anywhere near those extreme. Well, they can be, but they're not generally in those extreme areas. They're more like, for instance, a girl getting pregnant, unwanted pregnancy, and is not, promiscuous, not, not selling her body. It's just a young girl who's made a bad decision. And I would say that in some cases it would be a wise decision for that girl to terminate her pregnancy, because it's going to destroy her life if she has that baby in certain circumstances. But I'm pretty sure you would say there is no case that you can make that would, I've got this hornet buzzing around my head, by the way. That's why I'm waving my hands here.
Mm-hmm.
You would say that there's never an argument made that a woman, like a girl in that situation, should be able to terminate her pregnancy, and that would be a wise decision. Is that correct, David?
No, you're making assumptions and you're having perceptions about how I make decisions. And you've done this in other situations too. I'm actually not arguing anything. I'm not saying what anybody should or shouldn't be doing. I'm just helping people to be able to see the natural law of Kamma, and then whatever decision that they make is up to that person to make. I wouldn't say whether this girl, in the example that you're giving, whether she should or shouldn't get that abortion. I wouldn't be able to say whether it's wise or unwise, because it's only her that knows all the variables in her life. And it's not up to me to make a decision for her of telling her what would be wise or unwise in her life. That's her choices to make. All I can do is share the natural law of Kamma for her to be able to see that natural law of Kamma. So if she came to me and asked for consultation and asked for advice, I would share with her, if you decided to terminate your pregnancy, here's what you experience. And if you don't terminate it, here's what you experience. So when you're talking about, like, I can't see any situation where she should get that abortion and where it would be a wise decision, that's all your perceptions that you're forming within your own mind. And it's important that you don't attribute any of that to me.
Okay, then. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, it looks like Joe or Adela has a question.
Hi, David. This is Adela. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, perfect. My question is around feeling compassion or concern for all living beings without it turning to unpleasant feelings. So, for example, if I see images of children starving, people being killed in Gaza, and this is coming through my phone, and I feel that compassion, but then sometimes that compassion, like I'll get angry or sad or upset. So how do I balance that? How do I feel that compassion, but not get angry and not, feel sad to where it disrupts maybe my day? I think that's it. That's my question.
Sure. So what's happening there is that those painful feelings aren't coming from your compassion. It's actually coming from the craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, the wanting everybody in the world to be safe, wanting, expecting, craving this permanence for everybody to experience a certain thing. Now, we're oftentimes taught that, well, isn't that what we should want or expect? Well, as long as your mind is wanting, longing, yearning for it, when it gets what it wants, which you're not going to get that, but when the mind gets what it wants, it's going to have happy feelings, pleasant feelings, but when it doesn't get what it wants, it's going to get the painful feelings. And something like this, where every single child or every single human being is experiencing a certain thing, that would be permanence, and the mind's not actually going to get that. So whatever those feelings are, the sadness or sorrow, it's actually coming from the craving, desire, attachment. That's one side of it. All the way on the other side would be indifference, where we could care less about what happens to other people. It's like, so what? I don't care. That's their karma. Who cares? Right? That's not going to produce peace and joy either. So compassion is actually in the middle. It's the middle way, where you have concern for the misfortune of others. But you need to be able to understand how to practice that concern, where it's a mental state, where there's no longing, yearning. Because as long as you have that longing, yearning, craving the permanence, that's where the painful feelings are going to come in. So we're going to be talking about compassion when we get to chapter 14, because it's part of the 4 healthy mental states that need to be cultivated. And I'm going to teach you what these 4 healthy mental states are and how to cultivate them so that you can practice them more and more closely.
Okay, and my second question is just more around explaining what, trembling for the welfare of all living beings. Like, what does that entail exactly?
Yeah, so Paul was kind of hitting on this too, where what we usually do when we teach is we talk in these extremes so that way you can see the, more clarity about, what it is that we're talking about. So the Buddha did this during his lifetime. If you read enough of his teachings, you're going to see these extremes that he's talking in order to be able to help you see more clearly. And I teach in the same way as well. So here, when he's talking about this trembling for the welfare of all living beings, essentially what he's talking about is having this concern, but he's talking about it from a more extreme, where literally an enlightened being wouldn't really be trembling, like trembling in your skin, right? Like that's not what you would be doing as an enlightened being, but you would have this care and this concern for the welfare of all living beings. But the Buddha's talking about it in a little bit more poetic way and a little bit more of an extreme here to be able to help you see it more clearly.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, so I'm going to move to the next precept because I don't see any other questions anywhere. So this next one is abandoning the taking of what is not given, living purely, accepting what is given, awaiting what is given without stealing. So there's 4 aspects to this. Of course, the Buddha is teaching not to steal. In order to steal, there needs to be a certain amount of craving. There's a longing, yearning. I want that. And the person doesn't want to work for it themselves. So they want this. They're craving and longing, yearning. And if we steal something, there's a certain amount of ill will towards this being because you're harming this being. And then there's a certain amount of ignorance or this unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom. Because if I stole somebody's car, they can't go to work. They can't take their kids to school. They can't go to the store and get the basic necessities to sustain their life. And it takes a certain amount of ill will towards this individual to be able to do that. So the Buddha teaches you not to steal because if you cause this harm to this being, harm's going to come back to you. And you can see that you can easily get arrested. These people might find you and beat you up and murder you, right? You can have all kinds of unwholesome things coming to you if you choose to steal. People will steal from you. Then it's important to not assume that something can be taken or used. If I was a college student and I was turning in a term paper at my college and my professor was out of the room and I saw a stapler on their desk, if I just assumed that I could use the stapler and pick it up and start stapling my paper, if the professor walks in and sees that, and I've assumed that I can use this, they might be like, hey, what are you doing? Like, that's my stapler, right? Maybe they're attached to their stapler and they're not interested in sharing it with anybody. And now this anger that is arising in their mind, they don't understand that their own mind is causing that. It's not me that's causing that anger. And now their bitterness and harshness and hostility, that resentment, maybe they take it out on me by failing me on this paper. Or maybe they fail me in the entire class, right? This is going to produce unwholesome results for me because I've now caused harm, assuming that something could be used, and I've just taken it without permission. But remember, the teachings of the Buddha, they're not black and white. Right? He's not teaching you to do things a certain way all the time, because that would be without thought. That would be a decision tree. That would be whenever this happens, do it this way. That would be a permanent answer for every situation. And that's what the unenlightened mind tends to look for. It wants this black and white. It wants it very clear. Just tell me how to do it always. But that's not the way these teachings work. Because let's just say I was out in my village and there was another villager, my neighbor, who was doing some yard work and they cut their arm and they were bleeding profusely out of their arm. And I noticed my other neighbor has a piece of fabric on their front porch that I could easily grab and tie up a tourniquet on their arm and save this person's life. Well, I'm not going to go to that other neighbor and ring their doorbell and be like, ding dong, and just stand there and wait for them to come downstairs, realize that someone's at their door, open their door, say hello, all the niceties. Oh, by the way, our neighbor is bleeding out. They're probably just about dead by now because I've taken so long. Can I use your fabric to go tie up a tourniquet? Right? I'm not going to do that. If I see that there's this fabric out there, I'm just going to grab it and I'm going to go tie up this tourniquet, get this person in an ambulance and headed to the hospital, right? But then because I know this natural law, I'm going to go to the neighbor, ding dong, hello ma'am, hello sir, nice to see you. I needed to come and apologize to you because I've had a neighbor over here that was bleeding and I needed to use a fabric that was on your porch in order to save their life. And I'm really apologize that I took this without your permission, but I would like to replace this fabric for you. Could you tell me where you bought it from so that I can go buy you a new one? Or maybe I could give you the money for it and you could purchase it yourself. And, I'd do this either way, whatever is best for you, right? So I'm going to make amends in this situation. But if I didn't know this natural law in the teachings that the Buddha is sharing with you, I might not do this, right? And now it's going to produce unwholesome results for me. So the Buddha's not teaching you black and white. He's teaching you to move to this higher consciousness, take in the variables, and figure out what would be wise or unwise in any given situation. And depending on the variables, you might do it one way or another. And this is where your mind needs to be able to think through the situation and have concentration and have clarity of mind to be able to make those wise decisions. Here, the Buddha talks about accepting what is given. What this is that if somebody's practicing generosity with you, they are enhancing the quality of their mind by practicing generosity. And what the Buddha teaches you is that it'd be wise to accept that offering because it's enhancing the quality of that person's mind. So say grandma gives you a sweater at the holidays and you look at the sweater and you know that you're never going to wear this sweater a day in your life. What the Buddha is teaching you is to accept that, right? Because that's helping grandma's mind. It's enhancing the quality of her mind because when you practice generosity, it's going to train your mind to let go. It's going to train your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. So if I was to shut down grandma's generosity, it would shut down her ability to enhance the quality of her mind. So what the Buddha teaches you to do is accept this gift. And now that you have it, you can practice generosity. You can give it to somebody else. And if grandma gets angry at this, that is grandma's mind that's causing that. She's having a craving or an expectation that I wear the sweater and now I haven't worn it. So her mind is causing her own discontentedness. It's not pure generosity that she was practicing. But now, instead of putting it in my closet and sitting there for 20 or 30 years and deteriorating, and nobody actually gets to use the resources that were used to create this sweater, now it goes through maybe 4, 6, 8, 10 different hands of everybody practicing generosity and everybody enhancing the quality of their mind. But eventually it's going to get to that 10th person and they're going to look at the sweater and they're going to be like, this is the most beautiful sweater I've ever seen in my entire life. And I'm going to wear this every day of my life, right? So this is what you would like to be able to do in these kinds of situations is accept what is given. But remember, it's not black and white. If someone offers you heroin or crystal methamphetamine, are you going to accept what is given? Surely not, right? That would be unwise to do that. So it's not black and white. You need to be able to understand what the Buddha is teaching you and make wise decisions. That's discernment. Then the Buddha teaches awaiting what is given. This is making sure that whenever you say have a life partner or roommate or somebody like this that is going on a trip, if you maybe have certain things in your mind that you want this person to give you while they're on their business trip, if you loaded them up with a bunch of expectations, now they're out on their trip, feverishly going around looking for the things that you want. And if they bring back what you want, you're happy and excited. And if you don't get what you want, you're angry or frustrated or sad or some other discontent feeling. So by awaiting what is given, it protects your mind. And it protects the relationship, that you're not loading this person up with a bunch of expectations and burdens from you. So awaiting what is given is to ensure that you're not putting expectations on people to give you a certain thing. But now you might also have situations where people come to you and they actually offer you, right? Like I've had situations here in Thailand where students will come to me and they will say, hey, David, I'm going back to the US for a 6-week holiday. And when I come back, is there anything that you would like me to bring you from the USA? In this situation, the person is practicing generosity, and now they're asking me if there's anything that I would like, right? And in that situation, you might decide, sure, can you get me this or can you get me that, right? In this situation, I didn't put expectations on the person. They actually offered. So you can see in these situations that it's not black or white. But the Buddha is teaching you how to protect your mind and protect your relationships and ensure that you're making wise decisions that are going to lead to wholesome results for yourself. So do you guys have any questions on the second precept? Remember, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, it looks like maybe Adela has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, yes, me again. Maybe this isn't exactly related to the precept. Maybe it is a little bit, but for example, your example of grandma giving you an ugly sweater, and you look at it and you don't really like it, but you accept it because she's being generous. Now, where I have, and I guess, and I don't know if it's an issue or what, but like, for example, if somebody were to give me an ugly sweater and I accept it because of their generosity, and then, I think, okay, I'm going to donate it, but then I run into this issue where I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want them to be upset at me for donating a sweater that they've given out of goodwill and their generosity. So would you say that's like a craving on my part, or like, where would that stem from?
Yeah, that's a craving for you, that you want this person to be permanently happy. And also your mind isn't understanding that it's not you that's causing their painful feelings. It's their mind themselves. And in that situation, when they gave you that sweater, they weren't practicing pure generosity. They still had a craving, desire, attachment. They had a want and an expectation because they wanted you to keep that sweater and wear it for yourself. So now their painful feelings are coming from their own mind. And when you start to be able to see that in the Four Noble Truths really, really clearly, you'll understand that if they get upset or angry, that you're not causing it. And you can feel completely comfortable giving away this sweater to somebody else. But if you understand personal existence view, if this was really the situation, I would encourage people to wear that sweater, right? Because it's going to help you eliminate personal existence view by going out into the world wearing the sweater that you actually don't want to wear. That's your own craving. If somebody didn't truly want to wear this sweater because they want to be perceived by others in a certain way. So I'm using this example of giving it to somebody else. But truly, if a student had this situation, I would actually encourage them to wear the sweater.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. Denise, that's great that you were thinking that. Perfect. Okay, so now the third one. Here, the Buddha teaches abandoning unchastity, abandoning sexual relations with women, men, who are protected by their mother, father, mother and father, brother, sister, or relatives, who are protected by teachings, who have a husband, wife, or partner whose violation entails a penalty, or even with one who has been garlanded by a man, woman, or partner as a sign of engagement. So we're going to break this down because there's many pieces to this. Oftentimes this is translated as no sexual misconduct, right? Well, that doesn't really give you any information whatsoever. But the Buddha's words actually give you the real information of what you need to be able to practice this. Because if you choose to have sex, you would like to do it in a way that's harmless, that's not causing harm to other beings. And that's what the Buddha is teaching you, is how to not cause harm through your sexual activity. So this part where he talks about having sex with someone who's protected by their family, this would be having sex with minors. And if we had sex with minors, it's going to cause harm to that individual and to the family as well. Having sex with an 8-year-old, a 12-year-old, something like this. If you've had sex before, you know how impactful that was when you had sex the first time. And if we were to have sex with a minor, it would be very impactful to their mind. And now it's going to lure them away from actually being able to learn and grow and develop in terms of what their family is trying to teach them. So the Buddha teaches that it's unwise to have sex with minors. And this is one of the things where in most parts of the world, the human law actually matches to the natural law of Kamma. In most places, there's some kind of law that talks about not having sex with minors. But there's actually some places on the earth where it's not illegal to actually have sex with a minor. You can actually have sex with an 8-year-old child or a 12-year-old child. But if you look at those places and the societies that have those kinds of things, you can see that their political system and their education system and their economy isn't very well developed, and they're actually really struggling in that country. So that's the unwholesome Kamma that they're experiencing in that environment, in that population of people, because they're choosing to regularly have sex with minors. Here, where the Buddha talks about whose violation entails a penalty, This is sex without consent. If we were to force somebody to have sex with us, this would be raping them, and now we're causing harm. We can get murdered, we can get injured, we can get arrested, we can get diseases and illnesses, we can get all kinds of problems in choosing to do that, and it would be unwise to do that. Here, where the Buddha says abandoning unchastity, that's having sex with multiple partners. If you know what chastity is, in ancient times, there were fathers who would put metal underwear on their daughters, and the father was the only one who had the key to the lock on their metal underwear of their daughter. Now, I can't imagine walking around with metal underwear, but there were women who actually were doing this based on the way that things were practiced during that period of time. So that would be chastity. That would be having sex with nobody whatsoever. It's called a chastity belt. So unchastity would be just the opposite, where you're out there having sex with anybody and everybody, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 different partners in a week or a month or something like this. That would be chastity. So if we were out there doing that, we can see that we experience the unwholesome results, the unwholesome Kamma, based on our unwise decision. We experience sexually transmitted diseases. We experience maybe getting beat up or murdered because these partners find out about each other and now they start fighting and being jealous over us, right? Or maybe we lose our reputation in the community, or we lose a certain amount of wealth having to deal with all these different partners. There's a lot of difficulties and struggles that come through this. If you have ever been in a culture, you know, cultures where people meet a partner, they talk to their family agrees that you can move in while you're saving money to be able to purchase a house. This is a family that's actually accepted their relationship. And now this isn't what the Buddha is talking about here, where he talks about people who are protected by their family members, right? So if you're in that kind of culture, if you decide to do that at some point, that's not what the Buddha is talking about, because in this situation, the family has accepted their relationship and you're not causing any harm in this situation. Here, where the Buddha says who are protected by teachings, this is individuals who have decided to become celibate. You can get to the second stage of enlightenment and still be having a sexual relationship, and you can do all the other work on the path to enlightenment. And oftentimes that's what people do, is they make their way up to the second stage of enlightenment, because in that second stage of enlightenment, you're going to be quite peaceful. You're going to be quite joyful, but you're still going to have frustration. You're still going to have agitation and annoyance, particularly around sexual activity. Because in some situations, you're going to be able to get sexual activity and you're going to feel satisfied and have pleasant feelings. But in other situations, you can't get it, or you can't get it to the level of satisfaction that you want. And you're going to be agitated and frustrated and annoyed. That's because the mind has this longing, yearning for sexual activity. But if you are interested in moving to the third or the fourth stage of enlightenment, where the mind's actually enlightened, an individual would eliminate sexual activity. But again, people oftentimes get to that second stage of enlightenment and just hang out there for a while, doing all the other work on the path to enlightenment. And then when they're done with having sexual activity, because you're not going to be on your deathbed still having sex, you're going to move beyond that at some point. Well, when you're ready to move beyond that, you and your partner can talk about that, and then you can move beyond it. And that's where you'll see there's more peace and more joy in the mind. You don't have that agitation around sex. Well, for people who have decided that they're going to be celibate and they're making their way to the fourth stage of enlightenment, where their mind is actually enlightened, that's the very best thing that could ever happen for this person, to actually get to enlightenment, where their mind's completely peaceful and joyful. And it would be wonderful for all the people around that person, because that person can share wisdom that would help others to be able to also understand how to get to enlightenment. So if we were to try to lure that person away from their vow of celibacy, it's causing harm to that person, and it's causing harm to all the people around them. So the Buddha teaches you that it would be unwise to do that. Here in Thailand, they make it really easy for you that if someone's wearing an orange robe and they're shaving their hair, they've decided to be celibate, and it would be unwise to have sex with that person. Also, people who wear white and shave their hair, they're also choosing not to have sex, and you would understand to not have sex with that person or even try to have sex with that person. I no longer have sex, but that's not why I wear white. It just so happens that people who do wear white no longer have sex. I don't need to advertise to other people that I'm not having sex. And, if somebody was interested in that type of activity, I wouldn't choose to do that. It's your own mind that's choosing to do that. But wearing the clothing surely helps other people to be able to know. It's kind of like wearing a wedding ring, that people know that you're married. But still, it comes down to your own individual decisions of whether or not you choose to do that or not. So if you're interested in practicing this precept closely, you wouldn't choose to try to have sex with someone who's taken a vow of celibacy and no longer having sex. These next two here is sex with people who are already committed in relationships. That's like if you were single and you were to lure somebody out of a relationship, or sex outside of a relationship you were committed to. That would be unchastity. So you would like to abandon that, because if you're having sex with someone who's already in a relationship, or if you're already in a relationship, breaking out headlights with baseball bats and stuff like this, right? This is the loss of wealth that you can experience from that. If you were practicing unchastity, this would also be connected to human trafficking. If you went into an environment where people were being forced to have sex against their will, and you're maybe paying for that, or maybe even not, there's just people being forced to do that, this would also be part of the unchastity. And because of that, in those kinds of environments, once again, you can get sexually transmitted diseases, you can get beat up, you can get murdered, you can get robbed, right? People can steal from you, you can lose your wealth. These are all things that can occur by way of you practicing this unchastity and going to an environment where there's human trafficking. Sometimes people are offering paid sexual services and they're doing it willingly. Right? And even in this situation, it's still unchastity, because you're having sex with multiple people. And once again, you can have sexually transmitted diseases, get beat up, murdered, robbed. You can lose your material wealth as you get addicted to these types of services. So it would be unwise to do these kinds of things based on what the Buddha is teaching you here. And you can independently verify through the cycle or through the natural law of Kamma. Notice that the Buddha doesn't talk about same gender relationships here. He was aware of them because he talks about them and mentions them in his teachings. He doesn't actually teach anything about it. He just makes the observation that it's occurring. And he doesn't include it here as sexual misconduct because two loyal, loving, consenting adults that are choosing to have sex with each other, they're not causing harm to anybody. They're two loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex. You can see throughout human history, if you understand the universal truth of impermanence, that there's never been a time where everybody had sex with the opposite gender. If every male had sex with a female and every female had sex with a male, that would be permanence. But we understand the universal truth of impermanence, that even 2,500 years ago, during the lifetime of the Buddha, people were having same-gender relationships. And even before that, right, from the beginning of human history, there's never been a time where everybody had sex with the opposite gender. It just didn't occur. So the Buddha understood 2,500 years ago that same-gender relationships don't cause harm, and that's why he didn't include it. He didn't include it here, because he understood the natural law of Kamma very clearly. And this was 2,500 years ago that he understood this. We have people today that don't understand that same-gender relationships aren't causing harm. They might have craving in their mind. They have anger, perhaps, or they have a certain amount of unknowing of true reality or ignorance. So if you're somebody who prefers a same-gender relationship, or you have a same-gender relationship, you're not causing any harm to anybody. If other people are getting angry or mad at you because of your same-gender relationship, they're causing their own anger. You're not causing that. So if you know people who have same-gender relationships, or if you have a same-gender relationship, you can rest assured that you're not causing any harm to anybody, because you're in a loyal, loving, consenting relationship choosing to have sex. And whether it's a male-female or male-male or female-female, there's no harm that's being caused here. We can also understand transgender individuals through the teachings of the Buddha. If you understand that the body is one thing and the mind is something completely different, that you understand that it's impossible for every mind that comes into a physical body to identify as the same gender as the sexual organs in the physical body. If the physical body has male sexual organs, the mind can actually identify as a female. Or if the body has female sexual organs, the mind can identify as a male. if you understand the universal truth of impermanence, you understand that it's impossible for every mind to end up in a body and identify as the same gender as the physical body. And if you understand the cycle of rebirth, that we've all been beings at different times in different existences, somebody could have been female, 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 and now their mind is essentially now creating this new mind where it ends up in a new body that has male sexual organs. And now that mind that identifies as a female is in a body that has male organs, and now they identify as a female. This is completely normal, and it can happen with someone being male, 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 and now ends up in a female body. And now the sexual organs are female, but the mind is identifying as a male. So transgender individuals are completely normal. It's understandable through the universal truth of impermanence, through the cycle of rebirth. These are all natural laws that you can see. So if you're an individual who is a transgender, or you know people who are, they're not causing any harm. And that's why the Buddha doesn't talk about those kinds of things here. But he did talk about it in his teachings. He just makes an observation that it's occurring. Sometimes people ask me about masturbation because they've been taught to never masturbate, that it's going to cause all this harm and they should never masturbate. Well, I'm going to share with you some situations where it could be helpful and beneficial, and I'm going to share with you some situations where it could be harmful. So let's just say somebody's listening to this talk and they realize that they have 5 boyfriends or 5 girlfriends, or maybe 10 boyfriends, 10 girlfriends. They're like, wow, the Buddhist teachings are really true. I should bring this down to just one person. Well, now maybe as they're shedding their relationships and coming down to just one partner, they have this really high sexual craving in their mind, and they would like to use a little bit of masturbation to knock that down. Well, that could be very helpful for them. That's actually producing wholesome Kamma because they're bringing their sensual desire down. Or let's just say somebody had such a high sexual craving that they were thinking about going out and raping somebody, but they used masturbation instead to knock that down. And now that's produced wholesome Kamma or wholesome results for them. Because if you understand anything about a dam, they have these multi-million-dollar structures that hold back water. And they protect the dam by, if the water is rising up and putting a lot of pressure on the dam, they will open up the dam and release the water. And then once the water goes down over multiple days, they will close the dam again to protect the dam. And now it'll build the water back up again, right? So it's the same thing, that if you are having sexual craving in your mind and it's building up and building up and building up, you might feel a lot of pressure in your mind, and you can actually release that through some masturbation. And now let's just say you went 2 weeks without having sex and you used a little bit of masturbation. Well, now maybe you go 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks without sex. Hey, that was actually beneficial for you. So now maybe you use a little bit of masturbation, but now maybe you go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months without having sex, and now you use a little bit of masturbation. Or maybe you go 1 year without sex and you use a little bit of masturbation. You're actually decreasing your sensual desire, and this is producing beneficial results for you. But if you were to use masturbation excessively, maybe 15, 20, 25 times a day, this is increasing your sensual desire, and that's going to cause harm to your own mind. So you would like to be able to make sure you understand how you're using this. Are you decreasing your sensual desire, or are you increasing it? It's not all beneficial, but it's not all harmful either. Something like sex with animals, this is one of the few things that are actually black and white. It's very clear that if you had sex with an animal, it's going to cause harm. This animal can't give you consent to have sex with it. And I'm sure that if somebody tried to do that, that they would end up getting injured. They could get diseases and illnesses and things of this nature. Sometimes people ask me about pornography. If you read the book in chapter 7, I wrote up a good portion of the book to be able to help you understand this topic, because oftentimes when people are considering going towards pornography, what they're really craving is intimacy. They're craving to be with a partner, and they maybe can't do that, so they go towards pornography. And now they go into that, and that oftentimes includes some masturbation perhaps, and now they get caught up in this fantasy world. And now even if they try to come out of that, where their mind can get really addicted to that, if they try to come out of it, it's really challenging for them to go back to spending time with an actual real life partner. And even when they're doing that, it doesn't quite fulfill their fantasies in the same way as the pornography. So they can't ever really get to a satisfying sexual life because their mind is indulged in this fantasy world for so long. So if you're interested in intimacy, I suggest you go towards a real life partner rather than towards pornography, because this is going to get your mind addicted to that, and it's going to be really hard for you to come out of it. But you'll find more information in chapter 7 in the book if you'd like to read about that more. So do you guys have any questions on this precept number 3? Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. All right, so now I'm going to move to the 4th precept. This one's very straightforward. Abandoning false speech, refraining from false speech, a true speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy, dependable, not a deceiver of the world. So what the Buddha is teaching you to do here is to speak truth and to be honest, because as you choose to lie, people are going to discover those lies. And when they discover those lies, they aren't going to see you as being someone who's trustworthy and dependable or reliable. And now in your personal and professional life, you're going to experience unwholesome Kamma. Let's just say in a professional world, they found out that you're regularly lying. Well, now when your boss is interested in maybe staffing somebody on a really nice upcoming project that's going to be really helpful to move someone's career forward, they're not going to think about you to staff you on that project. And now your career is going to suffer because of your lack of trustworthiness or dependability. So you'd like to be able to speak the truth in all situations. If you can think back to when you were a child, and maybe in your early teenage years where you did a lot of lying, you probably realized that you had to keep your lie straight. What you told mom, you had to make sure you told dad and brothers and sisters and other people too. And your mind had to almost obsessively figure out what you said to one person versus another. Well, how could you ever get to peace and joy in your mind and in your life if your mind's having to overwork and be obsessively figuring out what you said to one person versus another? So by you just speaking the truth, your mind can be at ease. You don't have to be obsessively figuring out what you say to one person versus another, and you can experience improvement in your professional and personal life. This is the wholesome Kamma that you'll experience through speaking the truth. Now, I included this other teaching in here so that you could learn it, because this is another teaching from the Buddha where he's talking to his son. Sometimes people think that the Buddha left his family and he never came back. This isn't actually true. The Buddha came back. His son ended up ordaining with him and learning and getting to enlightenment. His wife ordained with him and got to enlightenment. His mother, or his stepmother, if you'd like to call her that, ended up ordaining and getting to enlightenment. There are many family members that came and actually ordained with the Buddha. And this is the Buddha teaching his son, Rahula. He's explaining to him that you shouldn't even tell a joke that has a lie in it. Right? The Buddha sometimes is seen in these images where he's meditating and looking all solemn and serious. And you might think that a Buddha goes around being solemn and serious all the time. This isn't actually true. A Buddha has a personality. They have a character. They're going to tell jokes, right? If enlightenment was all about going around being solemn and serious all the time, who would ever be interested in getting to enlightenment? That's not what you're interested in, going around and being so solemn and serious all the time, right? You like to go out in the world and have fun and be enjoying things and be cheerful and glad, right? Have a great time with your friends, right? That's what the Buddha would have done during his lifetime. That's what enlightened beings do. They don't walk around being solemn and serious all the time. So you might not attribute a Buddha as someone who actually tells jokes. But enlightened beings tell jokes, but they tell jokes that are uplifting and honest and truthful. Sometimes in the unenlightened state, when we tell jokes, we might tell degrading or diminishing jokes, right? Where you're degrading other people or you're degrading yourself. Or you might tell jokes that have lies in them. What the Buddha is teaching you is it would be wise to not tell jokes that have lies in them, to actually speak the truth when you're actually telling jokes. Now, these jokes are actually much more challenging to create, but when you use your wisdom to be able to do this, they're actually funnier. people will tend to laugh at them more. And early on, it's much more challenging to tell truthful jokes. But when you do this several times, you'll actually get better and better at telling truthful jokes. And people will find them much more funny than when you're degrading and diminishing people, because you're not interested in doing that kind of thing. An enlightened being wouldn't tell jokes that degrades and diminish others or yourself. You would like to tell jokes that are bright and cheerful and uplifting. So let me know if you guys have any questions here on this particular precept. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. All right, so I'm going to move to this last precept. This one here, the Buddha shares, refraining from strong drink and sloth-producing drugs, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. So once again, whenever you're studying and investigating the teachings of the Buddha, if you run across anything that you don't understand, it's important to investigate it, examine it. Don't assume that you know what words mean, because sometimes you run across words and you're like, I don't use that word that way. Because of impermanence, different people use words in different ways. Or you might run across a word that you never use, right? So this word heedlessness isn't one that you typically see people using very frequently. So you might kind of know what you think this word means, but if you don't actually know for sure, you would actually like to go look it up in a dictionary and not assume that you know what this word means. So that's what I did for you here, because most people don't use this word regularly. What heedlessness means is careless, thoughtless, inattentive, uncalm, unaware, and unmindful. What the Buddha is teaching you in a way that is timeless, using words that can transcend time, is he's saying if there's any substance that you could put into the body that produces carelessness, thoughtlessness, inattentiveness, unmindfulness, that it would be unwise to put it into the body. Because remember, the Buddha is teaching you to cultivate mindfulness or awareness of mind. And if you were to put substances into the body that's producing unmindfulness, it's actually taking you in the opposite direction of enlightenment. Because mindfulness is awareness of mind. And you're going to need that because you're going to need to know what are the wholesome qualities in your mind and what are the unwholesome qualities in your mind, so that you can then apply right effort to eliminate the unwholesome qualities and cultivate the wholesome qualities. But you wouldn't be able to do that if your mind was heedless. So the Buddha uses this language that is timeless, because he wouldn't have been able to imagine all the different substances that we would create that would potentially produce heedlessness. So he didn't list out a bunch of substances because he could have never imagined the various things that we would have created. So he's teaching you in a way that encounters and factors in impermanence, that there's going to be impermanence throughout history. So if there's any substance from now all the way through the end of time, you can apply the same teaching of eliminating substances that cause heedlessness. And here, what I'm going to do is share a few substances that you might have actually come in contact with or that you might know about. But this isn't an exhaustive list for you. This is just some things for you to be able to understand this natural law. So, for example, this substance of marijuana. This substance, we know that it definitely has medical benefits. There's been research studies of children that have 20 seizures a day, and they put a little bit of CBD oil on their tongue, and they don't have another seizure for 6 months. They've done scientific studies of this. So we know that this plant has medical benefits. It's irrefutable, right? But there's another part of this plant that can actually be used for a high. So there's the two different sides of the plant. The CBD is the part that's for the medical benefits, and the THC is the part that's for the high. So if somebody's looking for medical benefits, they will usually look for a high CBD, and they will usually ingest it as an edible or an oil. If someone's looking for a high, they will typically look for a high THC, and they're typically going to be smoking it. You can ingest it other ways for a high as well, but these are the things that are occurring. And smoking marijuana is going to cause harm to the lungs. It's producing unwholesome Kamma. That's the illness of the lungs that it's going to cause, right? So we can see the unwholesome Kamma as part of this. Now, if you have a medical reason to use marijuana, you need to look closely at that medical reason. Make sure it's an actual medical reason, because if you're taking it for something like stress or anxiety, there's no amount of marijuana that's going to solve that. That's not a true medical issue, that the stress and anxiety is being caused by craving, desire, attachment, and there's no amount of marijuana that's actually going to solve that. So if you're choosing to move in the direction of using marijuana, you need to be able to make sure you know what you're using it for. And if it's for a high, it would be unwise to do that. We understand that cigarettes don't have any medical benefits, and more people are learning this and discovering this and choosing to move away from that. That's where we saw a lot of lung cancer and mouth and throat cancers and tongue cancers and things like this because of the unwholesome results of ingesting those substances. We need to even look at our prescription medications, because some prescription medications can actually be addictive and produce heedlessness. So I don't suggest you follow anybody like we were talking about at the beginning. You would like to make conscious choices. Pay careful attention to all the decisions that you make. So if a doctor gives you a prescription, don't just blindly take that prescription. You're in the information age. You can look up that prescription in a matter of minutes, and you can know whether or not this prescription is addictive or not. And if you come back with information that shows you that it's addictive, maybe you talk to the doctor and you ask for a different prescription. And maybe they're like, sure, here you go. Here's another prescription, right? And you might be able to actually get a different prescription. But sometimes they may come back and say, it's actually not possible to give you another prescription. That's the only one that's going to solve this particular issue that you have. Well, if that's what you know, and you've learned that this prescription medication is addictive and it produces heedlessness, now that information is very helpful for you. Because if you're going to take that medication, you know to get off of it as soon as possible so that you don't get addicted to it and you don't allow your mind to regularly be heedless because of it. So that is helpful information that's going to allow you to make wise decisions and produce wholesome results. Caffeine is also a drug. It's a stimulant. It takes the mind up into an excited state, and then it's going to drop back off. If you're using caffeine, this is a common thing that a lot of people will use, but you're going to see if you move away from it, it's actually going to help your mind to be able to have sustainable energy all day long. That if you continue to rely on caffeine, you can only have energy when you have caffeine. But when the caffeine's gone, you're going to drop off and you're going to have difficulties maybe sleeping and other challenges like this. So if you actually eliminate your caffeine, what you'll be able to do is allow the mind to develop sustainable energy all day long. Because an enlightened being, they don't get tired. They don't get exhausted. They get sleepy where they need to sleep, but they don't get tired or exhausted. But you'll never actually be able to experience that if you keep relying on caffeine, because it's going to take your mind up and take your mind back down. So by choosing to move away from caffeine, you're going to be able to build this sustainable energy where all day long you'll actually have energy. If you choose to eliminate caffeine, you're most likely going to go through withdrawal symptoms. And allow yourself to understand that what you're doing is you're detoxing from a drug. If you're experiencing headaches or dry mouth or shakes or things like that, that's the withdrawal symptoms. Just like a heroin addict or someone who's addicted to cocaine is going to go through withdrawal, you're going to go through some withdrawal potentially when you're moving away from caffeine. Let yourself remember that this is a substance that you're detoxing from, and that gives you all the more importance and the reason why you need to move away from that, and it's going to help you to have sustainable energy all day long. We also learned that taking sugar in excess can produce heedlessness as well. We kind of learned this in our teens and maybe in our late teens and early 20s, and we know to not take a lot of sugar, right? So even sugar, something like that in excess can produce heedlessness. So we tend to learn that as we get closer and closer to adulthood. Sometimes you'll hear people that will tell you that psychedelic substances are going to help you get to enlightenment. This isn't actually true. What psychedelic substances do is they promote and produce introspection, where you look inward, and it kind of mimics some of the qualities that you need in order to be able to make your way to enlightenment. But it never allows your mind to develop those in a sustainable way that you can use them all day long, because you're going to need to be introspective and look inward all day throughout your day to be able to make wise decisions. You're not going to be able to be on the challenging phone call with your wife or your life partner, your mother or something like this and be like, hey, Mom, I know that I'm going to need to make these decisions. I'm so sorry. I can't really think about this right now. I need to go drop a hit of LSD and take some magic mushrooms, I'm going to come back to you and give you an answer to that in a moment, right? You can't do that. It's not possible. Or if you're in a business meeting and you need to be introspective, you can't go drop a hit of LSD to be able to be introspective in this situation. So you're going to need to be introspective and look inward all throughout your day in order to cultivate your mind. And if you were to rely on psychedelic substances for this, you're not actually developing that quality naturally to exist in your mind all day long. So people who are saying that psychedelic substances help you get to enlightenment, they're not understanding what needs to occur in order to be able to get to enlightenment. I would encourage you to move away from anything like that because it's just hindering you from being able to actually build the qualities that you need to be able to get to enlightenment. So this is everything on the fifth precept. And remember here that this isn't an exhaustive list. These are just some things to talk about to be able to help you see this natural law more clearly. And this particular precept is actually really important in addition to all the others, because if you're not practicing this precept, you're more likely to have unwise decisions related to all the other precepts. So if you were heedless on a substance, you're more likely to kill, to steal, to have sexual misconduct, and to lie. And now it's going to promote all kinds of unwholesome karma for you. If you go to a jail or to a prison and you talk to the prisoners and say, why are you here? They might say, I'm here for murder, or I'm here for robbing a bank or whatever. But if you're like, no, like really, like why are you truly here? About 80% of them will tell you that it's substances that cause heedlessness because they would have never killed that person if they weren't high on drugs, or they would have never robbed that bank if they didn't have a drug habit to feed. So this particular precept is very important, where you'd like to be able to move away from all these substances and any others that would potentially cause heedlessness. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. So I see some questions here in Zoom. Julia is asking, is a cup of coffee per day considered a strong drink? What is the difference between coffee and tea? Why is caffeine listed here, not tea? So caffeine is the underlying substance that you'll find in things like coffee, tea, energy drinks, things like this. And you'll find that all of those are going to produce heedlessness. It's not what the Buddha is saying here as strong drink, but it is a substance that causes heedlessness. And you need to be able to see this truth, that the Buddha is not giving you an exhaustive list because things like this didn't exist, right? LSD didn't exist during his lifetime. But if you understand this word heedlessness, then you can see what the substances are that would potentially produce this heedlessness. So coffee is, of course, stronger than tea typically, but even tea has caffeine in it. You can get to the point where you eliminate all these things and your mind is going to be bright and cheerful and uplifted and have sustainable energy all throughout your day. But you're going to probably detox as you go through that. Kim is asking question. I have a question regarding false speech. What if telling a lie protects the life of another or yourself? Is there less impact on your Kamma? A classic example is the Anne Frank story. If you lie to the Gestapo and the others you are hiding live another day. If you tell the truth, all could be taken to a concentration camp, including you and your family, for defying the law. Okay, so it's important to understand that telling the truth doesn't mean that you tell everything that you know. So if somebody ran into my house in World War II and they were Jewish and they were hiding under the bed in my bedroom, and the Nazi soldiers showed up and said, hey, where's Barbara? Did she run into your house? We're looking for Barbara. I wouldn't say, oh, Barbara's waiting under my bed. You can go get her, right? I wouldn't say that. What I would say instead is I would say, oh, you're looking for Barbara? Well, maybe we should go look around the bush over there. Maybe she's hiding behind the bush. Let's go over there and look, right? I haven't lied in the situation. I'm just redirecting their mind to somewhere else. I'm still telling the truth, right? So telling the truth doesn't mean you tell everything you know, unless you're in a court of law. the Buddha talks about this in his other teachings, where he says that if you're in a court of law, you can actually be penalized for not telling everything you know, that it would be wise to tell everything you know in that situation. But in other situations, you would like to tell people things on a need-to-know basis, right? Does this person really need to know this? And this Nazi soldier showing up doesn't need to know Barbara's hiding under my bed because, yeah, something harmful is going to happen here. So you can just redirect the mind by still telling the truth. You haven't told a deliberate lie. You're just kind of helping them to look somewhere else and maybe even participating in the search outside in the woods as if you're helping this person, and they don't need to know anything else. And you're not lying in that situation. You're just saying, hey, you're looking for Barbara. Maybe we should go look in the woods near the bush. Let's go look over there. Right? And now you're just redirecting them somewhere else. So that's a way that you can handle those kinds of situations. Julie is asking, garlic, onion, and similar vegetables are considered foods that should be avoided in Chinese Buddhism or Tao teaching, similar to coffee. What are your thoughts on this? Thank you, Teacher David. There's nothing harmful about garlic or cloves or any of these other things, onions. These are plants that provide nourishment to the body. This is a misunderstanding that people have about these particular things. There's nothing that's causing heedlessness. There's nothing that's causing harm to the body or anything like this. The only reason why you would be interested in avoiding those things is if the body was physically allergic to it and it produced unwholesome results in the actual physical body. But there's no unwholesome results from eating garlic and onions. There's nothing that's harmful that's going to come to you. And you can see that for yourself through your own direct experience if you choose to eat onions or garlic. Okay. Let me see if we have any other questions anywhere. I don't see any other questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to end class by just thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest in learning and practicing the teachings. We did go a little bit over in our class today just because this is a really big topic. You'll see that some classes go an hour, hour and 20 minutes, or some of them might go a little bit longer. It just depends on the topic, but we've been going through some very meaty topics recently. So the Eightfold Path and this particular topic tends to take a little bit longer to teach, but I really take my time because this is an important topic for you to understand. So thank you all for your questions. Thank you for your interest to be able to learn and understand the teachings. If you guys have any questions, you know that you're always welcome to ask those in live classes. You can post in our Facebook group, you can send me private messages, or you can schedule personal guidance. Because a topic like this, you can learn it, but then applying it in your day-to-day situations are going to be unique in each situation. So I haven't covered every situation that you'll ever encounter. So you're going to probably encounter certain situations that have certain variables that are different than what I've been talking about in class. And where you need that guidance, that's where you can reach out to me and I'll be able to help you to be able to understand how to apply any of the teachings of the Buddha in any given situation. But ultimately, the decisions that you make, it's up to you. I'm just going to show you if you make decisions in this way, what you'd experience. If you make decisions in this way, this is what you'll experience. If you make decisions in this way, this is what you'll experience. And then you can decide for yourself what you would like to do. So next week, we're going to be in chapter 8, which is titled Transforming the Three Poisons: Craving, Anger, and Ignorance. You can read that ahead of time if you like, or you can read it after class in our book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is where you're going to broaden your understanding of the problems in the unenlightened mind and deepen it as well. We're going to talk about not only the problems, we're going to talk about the solutions of how to fix them as well. This is going to really help open up some things in your mind about what it is that's really plaguing the unenlightened mind and how to actually solve it. So that's what I'm going to be doing next week. This week, I'm teaching a retreat here in Chiang Mai from 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. and then from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. So if you'd like to participate in that, you can either come in through Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, because depending on your time zone, it might actually work out well for you. You can see online, this retreat is called Purification of the Mind to Attain Enlightenment. And there's specific classes that I only teach once a year. And you can watch those live and participate in the class, or you can watch the recordings if you like. Because what I'm doing is I'm taking about an hour to an hour and a half on each individual fetter, explaining what it is, what the symptoms are, how to eliminate it, and how to know that you've actually eliminated it. So if you'd like to learn that kind of content, it's available for you in this retreat that I'm teaching right now. So whatever you do today, have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for attending, and perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Sawadee ka.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.